You see him in the corner of the gym. He loads the bar carefully, checks his form in the mirror, not out of vanity, but for precision. He takes his time between sets, writes something on his phone, breathes. Then he lifts. Controlled, smooth, full range of motion. Nothing about it is impressive to the casual observer. The weight isn't massive, there's no grunting, no one's watching. And across the room, there's another guy. He's louder, the plates rattle as he loads the bar. He doesn't warm up much. He psychs himself up, slaps his face, yells a little. He lifts. The bar barely moves through a full range. His back arches. His spotter does half the work, but the weight is heavy. People glance over. He drops it with a crash. He's breathing hard, smiling. Here's the question. Which one is stronger? Most people would say the second guy, because the weight was heavier, because it looked harder, because he performed. But you'd be wrong, because strength isn't always loud, and the strongest people in the room are often the ones no one notices. This is about ego lifting, but not in the way you think. Most people define ego lifting as lifting weight you can't handle. That's part of it, but it's incomplete, because ego lifting isn't just about weight, it's about why you're lifting it. It's not the bar that's too heavy. It's the identity you're trying to carry. Let's define it properly. Ego lifting is when the weight you choose is determined by what others will think, what you want to prove, and who you need to appear to be. It's lifting for validation, not progression. And here's the truth most people won't admit. Almost everyone ego lifts sometimes. Not always, not constantly, but in small, subconscious moments. You add an extra plate because someone's watching. You skip the deload week because it feels like going backward. You lie about your max to a friend. You film a PR and post it, not to track progress, but to be seen. These aren't bad actions, they're human, but they reveal something deeper. You're not just training your body, you're managing your image. Why does this happen? Because the gym isn't just a physical space, it's a social hierarchy. And hierarchies trigger ancient parts of your brain, the parts that care about status, dominance, and belonging, especially for men. Research from the Journal of Health Psychology shows that men are more likely to engage in risky lifting behavior when other men are present, when they feel their masculinity is being judged, and when they perceive competition. In other words, the weights become props in a performance you didn't consciously agree to. You think you're training, but subconsciously, you're proving. And the scary part? You don't always know you're doing it. A study from Cornell University found that people dramatically overestimate their own autonomous motivation, the degree to which they act for internal reasons versus external approval. Translation: you think you're lifting for yourself, but often you're lifting for the idea of yourself that you want others to believe. Now let's talk about the other guy, the one lifting with control, writing notes, taking rest days, deloading when needed. He's not weak, he's not unmotivated. He's just playing a different game. While the ego lifter is optimizing for looking strong today, hitting a number now, and winning the moment, the non-ego lifter is optimizing for being strong in 5 years, staying injury-free, and building a sustainable system. One is performing. The other is building. What separates them isn't genetics. It's not even discipline in the traditional sense. It's locus of control. Locus of control is a psychology term that describes where you believe your outcomes come from. An external locus of control sounds like this. You need to lift heavy, because that's what real lifters do. If you don't hit a PR today, you're falling behind. People will think you're weak if you deload. An internal locus of control sounds entirely different. You follow your program because you trust the process. Today's session is just one piece of a long-term plan. You measure progress over months, not moments. The ego lifter has outsourced his self-worth. The non-ego lifter has internalized it. Here's how this plays out in real behavior. Watch how they behave on a good day. The ego lifter hits a personal record, posts it online, and feels amazing for exactly 24 hours. The non-ego lifter hits a planned working set, logs it, and moves on. On a bad day, the difference becomes even clearer. The ego lifter misses a lift, feels like a failure, and skips the next session. The non-ego lifter simply adjusts his volume, finishes the workout, and analyzes why it happened. When someone is watching, the ego lifter instinctively adds weight to the bar. The non-ego lifter does exactly what the program says, regardless of the audience. And when no one is watching, the ego lifter often cuts corners, skipping accessories or shortening rest periods. The non-ego lifter trains exactly the same, whether the room is full or completely empty. You see the pattern. One is reactive, the other is consistent. And consistency, over time, is everything. A study published in the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine and Science in Sports examined autoregulation in strength training. Autoregulation means adjusting training variables based on daily readiness, fatigue, and recovery. The lifters who practiced autoregulation suffered fewer injuries, experienced more consistent strength gains, and reported significantly higher long-term adherence. Meanwhile, the lifters who always pushed for maximum effort peaked faster, burned out sooner, and carried much higher injury rates. In other words, the tortoise beats the hare. Not because the tortoise is more talented, but because the tortoise understands. Progress is not linear. Training is not a performance. Strength is cumulative, not episodic. The non-go lifter isn't emotionless. He's not a robot. He cares about getting stronger, deeply, but he's detached his identity from his performance. He doesn't think, I am my max squat. He thinks, I am someone who shows up, adapts, and builds over time. That shift from performance-based identity to prosper-based identity is the entire difference. Because here's the psychological trap. When your identity is tied to outcomes, every failure becomes a threat. Miss a lift? You're weak. Skip a session? You're lazy. Deload? You're regressing. Your self-worth becomes hostage to daily performance. And that's exhausting. But when your identity is tied to behavior, you become anti-fragile. Miss a lift? That's data. Skip a session? That's recovery. Deload? That's strategy. You're no longer afraid of looking weak because you're not performing for anyone. You're building for yourself. Let's go deeper. Why do some people develop this internal locus of control, while others stay trapped in external validation? It's not purely genetic. It's not about upbringing alone. It's about what you've learned from the gym rewards. If you grew up in spaces where loudness was mistaken for strength, where PRs were worshipped above consistency, and where rest days were seen as weakness, then you absorbed a false reward structure. You learned that the goal is to look strong, not be strong. And once that's wired in, it's hard to unlearn. But some people break the pattern. Usually, it happens one of three ways. First, through injury. You push too hard, something breaks, you are forced to rebuild slowly. And in that slow rebuilding, you realize that strength isn't about weight. It's about the system. Second, through a plateau. You've been chasing numbers for years, then you stop progressing. You hire a coach or read deeper into the science. You learn about periodization, fatigue management, and deloads. You realize the game is longer than you thought. Third, through maturity. You simply grow up. You stop caring what strangers think. You stop posting every personal record. You train in silence, for yourself. And you realize you are finally free. The irony? The moment you stop trying to look strong, you actually become strong. Because you're no longer wasting energy on defending your ego, comparing yourself to others, or performing for an invisible audience. All that energy goes into progressive overload, recovery, technique refinement, and long-term planning. You become efficient. And efficiency, over years, becomes dominance. Here's what the non-ego lifter knows that the ego lifter doesn't. The gym is not a stage. It's a laboratory. Every session is an experiment. Did this weight feel heavy or light today? Did I recover well from last session? Is my form breaking down under fatigue? Should I push or pull back? These are questions, not performances. The ego lifter doesn't ask questions, he declares. He says he's hitting 315 today no matter what. He says he's not leaving until he hits a PR. He claims rest is for the weak. He's not experimenting, he's forcing. And force works until it doesn't. Research from the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research backs this up. They compared two groups over 12 weeks. Group A followed a fixed progression, adding weight every week no matter what. Group B followed a flexible progression, adding weight only when ready. The results were clear. Group A had faster early gains, but suffered higher dropout rates and more reported pain and injury. Group B had slower early gains, but experienced better long-term progress and significantly higher adherence. Translation: patience beats force. Not sometimes, always. So what does the Nungo lifter actually look like in practice? He is the guy who warms up properly, even when the gym is crowded and impatient. He tracks his lifts in a notebook or an app without fail. He follows a structured program instead of chasing whatever feels good in the moment. He deloads every 4 to 6 weeks without a hint of guilt. He skips a session entirely if he is genuinely exhausted. He asks for form checks instead of pretending he already knows everything. He celebrates small victories like rep PRs and technique improvements, not just maximum weight. And he simply does not care if someone else lifts more than him. He's boring to watch, but dangerous to compete against. Because while everyone else is sprinting and burning out, he's compounding. And compounding is the most underrated force in fitness. People think strength is built in one crazy workout, one heroic PR, or one viral lift. But it's not. Strength is built in 500 unremarkable sessions. It is built by showing up on the days you feel terrible. It is built by doing the boring, repetitive work that no one ever sees. A 5% improvement every month doesn't feel like much. But over a year, that's a 60% gain. Over 3 years, you're unrecognizable. The ego lifter never gets there, because he's always chasing the moment, not the momentum. He peaks in year 1. The non-ego lifter is still climbing in year 5. Here's the final truth. Ego lifting isn't about the weight. It's about fear. It is rooted in the quiet fear that you are not enough, that you are falling behind, that people will judge you, and that you will eventually be exposed as weak. So you perform instead of train. You prove instead of progress. And you stay trapped in a cycle where your worth is always on trial. But the non-ego lifter, he's already decided, I don't need to prove anything. Not because he's arrogant, but because he's free. Free from comparison. Free from validation. Free to just build. So here's the real question. Who are you lifting for? For the person watching? For the number on the bar? For the version of yourself you're trying to convince exists? Or for the person you're actually becoming? Because one of those paths leads to burnout, and the other leads to greatness. The gym is a long game, and the people who win it, they're the ones who stopped performing, who stopped proving, who started building in silence. They're not the loudest, but 5 years from now, they'll be the strongest. If this hits you differently, subscribe.